Good afternoon, everybody. We're just going to allow a few seconds for people to join. We've got a few hundred people that have opted in for the webinar today. So I'm just going to let it run for a few seconds and then we'll start the webinar. Thank you for your patience. Okay, the numbers are climbing really nicely. I'm just going to give it a few more seconds. Okay, let's get going. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and a warm welcome to our speakers who have made this Let's Talk Business webinar possible today. By way of introduction, I'm Neil Piper, the head of content for Messi Frankfurt, South Africa, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce our esteemed panel of speakers. Tommy Letsuolo. Tommy is the business development manager in the wholesale, retail, and franchise team responsible for the automotive sector, focusing on dealerships, automotive aftermarket, fuel sectors at ABSA Business Bank. He is responsible for the development and implementation of ABSA's automotive strategy. Welcome, Tommy. Next up, we've got Mark Domisi. He's the National Chairperson, National Automotive Dealers Association, NADA. And Mark is an entrepreneur and he's got lots of exciting business interests covering all aspects of the retail automotive environment. In 2018, Mark was appointed as the National Chairperson of the National Automotive Dealers Association, a position he still holds today. He led the association through a tumultuous period during the various stages of lockdown and has the backing of an extremely strong management and national executive committee. Next up, we welcome George Minnie. He's the CEO of Autotrader. And George, I've known George for many, many years, and he's been on a journey through the eye of the storm of the automotive digital revolution. He's an architect of change, and he's the driving force behind Autotrader's successful transition from a traditional print business into a digital giant and clear market leader in its category. He has been at the helm since 2007. Welcome, George. And last, but by no means least, we've got Henry Botha, the head strategy and business analytics, ABSA Secured Lending for vehicle finance and home loans. Henry is a chartered global management accountant with extensive banking, financial services, and partnership development exercise across retailer, motor manufacturer, mobile operators, and fintech industries. He has been with ABSA Bank for more than 20 years. Wow, Henry, that's quite a feat. I thought you'd be wearing your red tie today after 20 years. On a serious note, though, just to set the scene for today, Automechanica is the world's largest network of international B2B events for the automotive aftermarket, which includes events in over 17 countries. Automechanica has launched a new digital format for the international audience with a focus of industry and trade. Under the motto of Let's Talk Business, a series of panel discussions on current topics with international key players, associations, and other relevant industry stakeholders. The series has been rolled out in many of the Messi Frankfurt subsidiaries with great interest and international appeal. As we build to hosting Automechanica as a live, yes, live in-person event at NASREC taking place between the 7th to the 10th of June this year, we will host 3 more webinars as the foundation for the event. At this stage, I would also like to acknowledge the RMI for their guidance in helping shape the direction of Let's Talk Business. The Let's Talk Business theme for today is evolution of the automotive retail sector, the future role of dealerships, and the shift towards digital retailing. It's a very, very interesting topic, And I can gather that why we've got so many people on the webinar today. So to all of you for joining, thank you very much. We appreciate your time. And then just before we start the webinar, just a few house rules. Please can I ask that any questions that are posted, if you do have any questions, please post them in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, and we will answer as many questions in the Q&A session that we're going to run towards the end of the webinar. Our first speaker, ladies and gentlemen, for the day is Tommy Letsuwalo. He's the automotive specialist, sector specialist at Absa Bank. Tommy, it's always great to host you, and thank you for joining us, and over to you.
No, thanks a lot, Neil, and I'd like to welcome everybody. And firstly, I also like to acknowledge our partners in the automotive industry for their commitment and collaboration that we've been building over the years, most specifically NADA, Auto Trader, RMI, and Mr. Frankfurt for the platform that we've been building over the years. So ours, in terms of automotive, it's more about building. And for us as a financial institution, it's very important for us to make sure that we have the right conversation, and more specifically in the dealership sector. As we all know, motor dealership sector, it's one of the key channels for us as South Africans and the automotive industry in general, where dealerships, as we know them, they are responsible of delivering vehicles. Over 80% of the vehicles are delivered through this channel. And now you've seen the escalation of the hybrid channel across the country. And in recent time, this has accelerated in numbers, where we have seen that all we do is try to enhance the buying and selling of vehicle. So on that, I mean, buying of vehicles has become a simple exercise that has increased customer satisfaction and shortened buying time. With this said, I mean, it's also created greater diversity with regards to channels, from brick and mortar formats into omni channels, and this has required that financing solution keep up with some of the response time in securing the dealer against fraud and cybercrime that have also escalated with this new change that is happening. So for us, we also spend time looking at consumer data, and the data also comes back and support that consumer value the vehicle buying experience. And I mean, for us as South Africans, we love our cars. However, on that experience, there were certain themes that came out. The key thing is transparent, predictable, efficient, and personalized service. And this has created a vast opportunity for dealerships to leverage their resources and be agile in aligning with those needs. So for us as a financial institution, we are a meeting point for dealers and customers. Therefore, the interaction for us, we view that it must be safe and flawless. As the ecosystem has evolved, there is also disruptions as everyone is fighting for the same customer through captives, business to business and business to customer, and people are trying to monetize the data that we've seen that is flowing around, and that has created a risk, especially to unsuspecting traders and buyers. And for us today, it's just to unpack that. As some of the models that have emerged are aggregators, both from consumers and dealerships, and the growing of the virtual dealerships. And these dealerships, we've seen they've gained traction, and you'll hear from my colleagues here about all these intermediaries that are there, and all the companies that will be that are technologically led in financing the transactions. So therefore, we've created a new ecosystem on that also comes with its own risk. You've seen OEMs direct to consumers, you've seen intermediaries on that. And with this, it has created a domestic market that we expect that it will fully recover by 2023, and double-digit growth for vehicle financed on that. And on this, there is a potential for further transaction and utilizing the digital retail shops and the growth of aggregators on that. So we still put the consumer in the middle of what we are doing. And with the whole retail evolution, especially in dealerships, it's very important that we go through the steps, making sure that there is protection on both sides. I mean, we've also seen recently that the vehicle purchasing life cycles has moved at least a step backwards, where the purchase starts online. Majority of the purchase starts online, and consumers got access to multiple and thousands of vehicles that they can choose from. And that makes dealers more competitive on that. And this is another channel that is very important on that. And we as a institution, we become the meeting point on how do we make sure that we created the touch points that are critical, but then also that can actually create value for the customers. As we have seen, customers are able to fully structure their finances, and this has increased margins as they've got time to also add some of the stuff. So Neil, for us in terms of this, it's very important that we get the right information as the market it's growing on that. But without wasting time, I just want to hand over to my colleagues, and we'll be spending time also in questions, and hoping that this will be a very interactive session on that. So over to you, Neil. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Tommy. I must say you're 100% right. The ecosystem has definitely evolved, and there is a lot of risk, but there are mitigating circumstances around that. We know that people are online first, but to unpack this evolution, that's why we've got the likes of Mark, who is our next speaker, just to give his viewpoint on this. So Mark, just on that note, a big thank you for being here today. We're very appreciative of your time, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you're going to share with the audience today. So over to you, Mark.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Neil. I'm coming across clearly. Thank you very much for ABSA and this. So thank you. Yes, my name is Mark Domisser. I'm the current NADA, National Automobile Dealer Association chairman. And I've been asked to speak today on the role of physical dealerships in a digital world. Just to qualify my views today, while I speak in the capacity as NADA chairman, a lot of these views are also my own. I might talk about one particular car brand, primarily as an example, not because I like it more than any other. I love every car brand in the whole wide world. But to use an example, I might mention a BMW or a Merc, and it's not because I don't like the one or the other. There's lots of airtime for everybody, I promise. So this topic today is the role of physical dealerships in a digital world. And it's a great topic. I love it because, you know, a lot of people out there are still asking the question, how are dealerships even here today in a digital world that we live in, and why can't we just miraculously just transact with buying cars more digitally, and why are they here and how are they still here? And it's a great debate. So and car dealerships are generally on the negative side of this debate. They are the proverbial DVD stores in waiting, dinosaurs, etc., etc. And I'm going to sit and obviously dispute this view today. But how I'm going to do it is really is the important pillars that dealers play in society today. And it's not about the economic. I'll talk about the economic reasons for dealerships, and we all know why. We could carry on about that, but really why we are still here is because of consumer needs and responsible consumerism. It's a term I've come up with now, and the complexity of consumer needs and the supply thereof. You know, at the end of the day, dealers are only going to live and survive if consumers actually want them and need them. And very similarly to even lawyers and bankers, you know, not the most popular bunch until you need one or you discover one. But once you have a good lawyer or a good banker backing your business or helping you, you understand the value in this. And this is what I want to try and talk about today. So let's revert back to hard lockdown, March and April 2020, and the arrival of the digital world. Since then, there's been an absolute PR campaign around the world telling us about how dealerships are dinosaurs, and the end is nigh. We live in a digital world, and therefore there's no need for them. No one will even drive cars anymore. We'll all be working from home and driving a lot less, etc., etc. The very same trend happened when Uber was launched, and everyone said, well, look, Uber, nobody's going to have their own cars. Everyone's going to be driving in Ubers and no one will have a car. And these sort of extreme views come from time to time in this digital world. And I don't think we're quite there yet. I think the metaverse is still 20, 30 years away before we get to that level, but that's for a debate for another day. I'll even show you a quick slide. Full screen. I can share the screen quickly. And it was the actual, for some reason, I don't know if it was the actual PR campaign, but it ended up going into News 24. The very PR campaign for this event on News 24 was interpreted as bye-bye car dealerships. And this is another typical example of some of the stuff that's out there. You Google the end of car dealerships, you'll see all this come up. Will this be the end? Is this the end? This might be the beginning of the end. Slow death. The rise of online car sales, the whole Carvana story in the US. This is quite on motortrader.com. Should the axe be taken to dealer network? So I'm going to stop the share there quickly. And there's just so much to this topic. And I'll never forget, as a part owner in a car dealership group, that my father getting hold of me a couple of weeks into lockdown on this article that he found on News 24. And it was telling us exactly the same thing, that this would be the end of car dealerships. And cars would miraculously just arrive in your driveway when you decided to buy one. And it was just such a strange view, but we were all so scared and we didn't really know. But one thing that did happen, the digital revolution in businesses and in consumerism has rampantly grown. But remember, I want to remind you that the same thing was said for restaurants. We thought we wouldn't ever be sitting in restaurants again. We certainly didn't think cinemas would ever come back, and they are to an extent. We couldn't go on family picnics. Churches, we wouldn't be able to go to church, and shopping centers, and the death of the shopping mall. Shopping centers would not exist anymore. They would die. They would have to convert to, I don't know, residential or theme parks or something. But the last time I went to Sandton City was this weekend, and I promise you couldn't move in the place. Okay, they literally are kicking customers away. And this is despite a really healthy, big trend of people shopping and online and searching online. And there's definitely, it's almost a hybrid type scenario when it comes to the physical clicks and bricks. I go to Sandton City. I go there probably once a month, and I go for very specific reasons. Probably every couple of months, I go and I buy specific work shirts, and I have to see the shirt. I have to smell the shirt, and I have to check it's the right size and the right cut. Because if my wife, for instance, goes off and buys cotton, I never wear the thing that stays in the cupboard. And it's a certain trend that there are certain things you can only buy online, and there are certain things that you need to physically see and touch. So I was asked, I never forget as well, post-lockdown, and how I was asked by so many journalists, what are dealerships doing to handle all the digital sales volume? And the answer to that was, one, well, perfectly. But two, they're actually doing less because we were selling less cars than pre-COVID. So the digital sales volume was actually a lot less than normal. And people were so confused by that. But, you know, what am I actually saying about that? What I was saying is that actually dealerships had been interacting with their customer bases on some type of digital level for quite some time. And I still maintain, what is a digital interaction? What is it? Is it a phone call over fiber and internet line, an email, a click onto a website, filling your details and asking for a dealership to call back, clicking on a Facebook ad, clicking on a manufacturer's website, refers you to a dealer, speaking to a salesperson on WhatsApp. All these kinds of things are digital interactions. Yes, it's not take a lot where you click and choose your car and it comes up these types of interactions. Dealerships didn't suffer once we had the post-hard lockdown protocols with their ability to interact with customers, to sell cars. It was actually relatively seamless. The most complicated thing during that period really was making sure we got the protocols right. Post-hard lockdown, the big trend I can see now is time. So in other words, customers are spending far more time researching, far more time online, as George will tell you later, and far less time in a dealership, which is actually a benefit for everyone. So we've also been here before. The story about car dealerships really not being around. There's actually so much scope for dealerships to be around today. So as a consumer, I have to ask the question, can I actually buy a car online in South Africa today and properly, the way we expect? So what I actually decided to do was shop a car and try purchase one online. I tried to do it this weekend. And I started with the premium brands because, generally there's sort of roughly 4 of them. And I decided, well, let me give it a go. So the first one, premium brand number 1, the car I wanted had just been launched, a very cool electric car. And I did it on my phone and I tried to buy it online. Very nice, quick process. But when I got to the actual buy button, there was no stock. So what happened there, which is a bit interesting, is that I was just told no stock. But by that process, the manufacturer hadn't taken my name, my phone number, my ID number, nothing like that, or my email address. And if I wanted to, I'd have to revert back and book a test drive and hope for someone to phone me back. So this was the 2 million rand customer, and I couldn't be accommodated, and they didn't have my details, and they don't even know that I searched. Premium brand number 2, I went for a lovely sedan, was just launched, great car, awesome online process. However, when it came to the last point, and they still had my name, but I had to buy the car and confirm the deal, I had a 50 grand discount and 100 grand of extras, and I had no idea what that was. There's the discount and here are your extras. Well, I couldn't tell what the extras were. What was it? Which, just to me, just didn't work. I didn't think I was going to spend 1 million rand once again at the click of a button and the car would just arrive at the dealership and I'd have to then go fetch it anyway. Absolutely not. It just didn't work for me. So the other 2 premium brands, premium brand number 3 and premium brand number 4, let's just call them that, they were very simple forms. Put your name in, put your email address in, tell me what car you like, which dealer would you like to phone me, and the dealer will call you back. And the dealers all called back. And just links to the point of premium brands and how complicated cars are. I cannot believe anybody in their right mind would buy a 1, 2, 3 million rand car online just by clicking and rocking up at the dealership, and the car would be there ready for delivery. It is such a complicated process. Cars are so complicated now. As ICE engines are starting to now compete in their waning life against electric engines and hybrid engines, etc., they all are so complicated. So we have a vehicle on one of our used car floors. It's a 2017 S-Class. It's a S65 AMG with about 35,000 kilometers. So we traded the car in, and all of a sudden we actually discovered that this particular vehicle has 500,000 rands worth of extras on it when it was purchased. The Swarovski crystal headlights and this and that, and that's what makes this car so valuable. But you cannot leave that up to a consumer. So premium brand number 2 was actually quite clever in selecting the extras for them, but you need to know what they are. I then also tried a volume brand. Let's give everybody a go. And they had quite a nice buying process. At the end of the day, I could buy the car via the dealer. I could choose a few extras. The problem that I found there were 6 model derivatives of the vehicle I was trying to buy. And this posed quite a serious problem because I said, well, hang on, is the top of the range maybe not as nice as or is the middle of the range almost as good as the top of the range? Which one is actually nicer? And to commit to that car, and I hadn't even seen it yet, I couldn't. And then I also had my other hat on. Well, what about if you are a first-time buyer? What if you are a loyal brand enthusiast? What if you're a tire kicker? It just didn't make sense. And there's so much education that's required for somebody buying a commodity of this nature when they come into the market. New car, new tech. There's the CPA to worry about. What if someone makes a mistake? What if you order a manual instead of an automatic? Just as by one click, the whole digital seamless buying process is just too far away in my mind. My conclusion at this stage is that the traditional OEMs actually are not ready for this process. They can't. It doesn't probably exist because of the extensive model range and the complexity of the product offerings that they give. Some of the smaller startups, the Teslas of this world, yes, it's very easy. You've got one car with one spec. You add the autonomous driving or you don't add the autonomous driving. It's going to be very difficult when you have to have a model range competing with the likes of Toyota, the likes of VW, the likes of Stellantis, and all these people. And also the other thing is that manufacturers cannot have bad consumer experiences with digital buying. It's too much of a risk. And at this stage, the whole process is just way, way, way too long. And actually, the customers aren't ready either. If you're maybe buying a commercial vehicle of quite a simplistic nature for a fleet, absolutely. But anything else, you are going to run into trouble. I was lucky enough this weekend to drive the BMW iX50. A friend of mine had one, and it just blew my mind. It's 2.2 million rand of Tony Stark tech, like you've never seen in your life. The car is incredible. It flipped my whole world. I'm really starting to warm to electric now. But I can tell you right now, I would never buy a car like that online. You have no idea what you're getting until you get into the car. And it's the same with the GLE 63 or a Porsche or a Range Rover or any of these things. You need the expertise of a dealer and a person opposite to you telling you what you're buying and what you've got to deal with. And of course, you need to touch, you need to feel, you need to smell, and you need to experience your car, just like buying clothes. So, as we know, car dealerships also offer just such a wide range of services, and these are the traditional reasons why dealers are here today. The reality is you're not buying a pair of shoes. You're buying anything from 150,000 Rand to 3 million Rand. I can't see it happening. First-time buyers are just also so important. Finance, the advice that we give as dealerships being representative of the bank are just so important. I think you run the risk of potentially putting someone else into an onerous contract if full finance process is online. How do they know what they're getting into? The monthly installment, the education that goes into a credit agreement, all that stuff is explained at a dealer floor. It provides huge value to people. Used cars, I think the used car market will just live forever. The used cars, as long as there are cars in the world, there'll be used car dealers. These provide a great, safe exchange environment. And of course, there's servicing. And even where the cars change to electric, manufacturers don't want to service cars. They want dealers to do this, just like the cell phone companies, just like any other sort of tech type store. So laws and regulations are another reason. There are so many laws that kick into place in a dealership environment. Hence the reason I mentioned about a good lawyer or a good banker. And they are there for the consumer's protection. And I think a lot of that can get lost online. Your protection from the CPA, your protection from Poppy Act, etc., etc. It gets quite hairy when you just purely try to do this as a total online process. So my view as a dealer, dealerships will be around for a long time yet. They'll shift around and change here and there. So the showrooms might get smaller, but we're still providing an essential service of value, even if you may not understand that just yet. Thank you.
Mark, thank you very much. Sure, there were quite a few things in there. I took quite a few notes here. The one thing that I really liked was the responsible consumerism that you just quickly came up with. I like that, and I think that's going to lead very nicely into what Henry's going to talk around now when it comes to risk. But the point you make is that I think dealerships can coexist virtually and physically in time when we are ready for that. But just your experience, listening to your experience this weekend, it just shows that the process is still flawed. There are so many there's so many question marks that a consumer's got around buying a vehicle. And like you say, it's not like buying a pair of shoes. It's a very tactile process as well. You know, people forget that. You want to experience, you want to smell that car, you want to get the experience of driving the vehicle, you want to see the leather finish, you want to, it's a tactile process. So I think as much as we're all excited about the virtual future, I think we've got a long way still to go. But those discussions will continue, and I'm sure that the dealers will get there sooner rather than later. But it's conversations like these that will focus on the areas of concern and the change that has to happen before we get there. And I agree with you. I think this is still going to be a while still. But let's wait for George. I'm sure he's got a different viewpoint. Yes. But that's why we have these conversations. It's a discussion. And it's good to, we agree to disagree on a few things, right?
Good.
Perfect. Thanks, Mark. Okay, next up, ladies and gentlemen, we're very happy that we've got Henry Botha from ABSA. He's going to now talk about the risk that Mark was talking about. So on that note, Henry, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you very much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. I feel a bit like the net on a ping pong table. I think Mark has just, given a few serves that George is going to return in about 15 minutes from now. So we'll see how that conversation goes. So I'm going to focus on what happens in the fraud environment, especially as, and Mark said it, more of the buying activity or pre-buying activity, like the research, selecting what you want, getting to know the vehicle, getting to know the dealer, happens online. And then at some point, there's a physical interaction that needs to happen, because you're effectively handing over an asset that's worth 200,000 Rand or 2 million Rand, as that BMW example that was used. It's not like handing over groceries. So it's a bit then just more difficult and more important to make sure that when that handover happens, that the identification and verification has happened, because that's the sweet spot for a fraudster to come in and take ownership without having, fraudulently so, and then they're gone. So we are acutely aware of the role that financial institutions need to help educate and protect consumers and dealers from fraud. The reality is that fraudsters are becoming more sophisticated and calculated in the methods used. There's also an equal responsibility that lies with the consumer. Sometimes things just are too good to be true. And it's at those moments that you need to step back and just make sure what's busy happening. The same can be said for a dealer. In the automotive industry, consumers and dealers are constantly under threat in this ever-changing world where scammers have mastered taking advantage of those that are unprepared. And these fraudsters are businesses. They sit in a boardroom like I'm sitting now, and they think about ways to get hold of a certain amount of white Uber-type vehicles to drive them across the border, or 20 bakkies that they need for some other purpose. And then they start working out a strategy as to how can they get to it. Which payslip is the easiest to falsify? Where can they get IDs and put different photos on them? Who can they choose to represent them, going to the dealer and making as if they are somebody else? Fraud is a global problem. It permeates across all economies, industries, and organizations. However, in South Africa, even before the pandemic hit us, there was already this maze of uncertainties for business to navigate. The Ombudsman said for banking services that they found that fraud played the biggest role in every category of complaint that they had to deal with. The country is grappling with a unique set of circumstances that has spurred financial pressure and desperation for residents and made many of us vulnerable to fraudsters. Economic growth in 1919, the year before COVID hit us, was only 0.2% in South Africa, hit by factors like load shedding and a myriad of other headwinds. Then the economy slumped by 6.4%. We lost, I think, in excess of 1.2 million jobs. And it just introduces more and more desperation into the economy. We're now slowly getting out of it with 2.1% growth forecasted for this year by ABSA's research team, and then another 1.8. If you add those two together, you see that we're not even close to having the economy that we had in 2019. So additionally, as we grapple with this, the context is that it's no surprise that fraud is becoming more top of mind for dealers. Even more so with this consumer behavior of trying to do as much as possible online, and then at some point they're asking you to either bring the vehicle to them or they come and fetch the vehicle. And it's then that it's the point where everything needs to be sorted out and fraud needs to be prevented. Fraudsters understand that all these challenges are there to exploit. Just going to start sharing some of the information that I've gathered on this. There we go, almost there. Okay, so they know that, and they're sophisticated, they're organized, they've got operations, they do business studies, they analyze consumer trends, they interview people to find out what are their vulnerabilities. So they know the stories of hardworking individuals that face dire situations and are likely to interpret and offer a too good to be true lifeline. They know that most people believe that it will never happen to them. And it's that financial pressure, and you can almost say, well, it's not going to happen with me, it's then that it happens. The fraud risks that dealers face is real, and it includes cases of individuals that come to them, which is first-party fraud. They just falsify some of their documents to say that they earn more than what they actually earn, or their financial statements. The other example that you get that we categorize fraud into is third-party fraud, which occurs with a genuine person that you meet, but the identity of that person has been falsified. And then they could also go and falsify some other documents so that you make the payout. But usually they try not to do too much so that you don't become too, that the warning signs aren't too many. That's also part of a fraudster strategy. So with this, I gathered some red flags that we've experienced together with the dealers as to what comes up. And that's what I'm going to share next. The first one is that you can see photos on identity documents and driver's license. And when those two photos are the same, you should be worried. I mean, what are the chances that you use the exact same photos and almost very closely aligned, you had the patience to go and apply for a driver's license and a new ID card within the same time period? That's very unlikely. But when you falsify a document, it usually plays out like that. I mean, you sit there and you falsify an ID document and a driver's license, you write today's date on both of them. But yeah, please be on the lookout for those. Also, those documents need to correspond with the golden sources that are being made available in South Africa. We've got quite an advanced economy in terms of capabilities that's available through banks, through the Department of Home Affairs, through NATOs. And when you compare to those golden sources, you should see the same as what you see in front of you. Then the client's employer usually becomes a theme. So you would see a single employer being used across multiple scams, multiple fraud cases, where the same employer gets used. Now, it's just easier for a fraudster to do that. They don't need to get to know the templates of multiple companies. Also, those that sit in dealerships and see these pay slips very often, it's easy for us to notice that this one looks a bit different to the one I saw yesterday. And those should also be alarm bells that come up. Clients are buying more out of town. I think that's made easier with George Mini's platform, that you can see what a vehicle costs in Cape Town versus what it costs in Mpumalanga. And you can then decide, well, I'm going to buy a vehicle that's 2,000 kilometers from me. But that can be a warning sign as well when everything that the client then does, or the fraudster, is they try and build urgency into this buying moment, where they say, okay, I'll see you, but it will be close to closing time, or I will see you on a weekend before you get into closing down the whole dealership and you're on skeleton staff and there's not many people to come and support you. Another one that's evident is the clients are only able to provide copies of their documentation, and they try and convince you that that's okay. It is really the real document. They just left the original document in a safe. They don't have the safe key. They can't get it open, but this is the right document and you can trust them. There's also this reluctance to come in and get verified for FICA purposes. Like they'll see you at a shopping mall, they won't see you at the physical address that is actually on the documentation that you're busy verifying. Look closely at what those FICA documents look like. Do they appear suspicious? Are they possibly fraudulent? Sometimes you just can't make it as good as what an original should be looking like. Then one other one that was quite interesting that we picked up is, let's say a white male, mid-40s, or a black female, mid-50s, that the issue of their driver's license was a few months ago. Whilst when you talk to them, they explain to you how they've been driving for 20 years. So it's a small print on an ID document, but when that says it was done 6 months ago for the first time, it's also a red flag to look out for. Then be vigilant when it's only temporary driver's license that's available. It sometimes is the case, but do take a closer look at all the other documents that are also available. Are they also marginal or true copies? True documents that you can trust. Then on payslips, there could be incorrect spelling, calculation mistakes, or misalignment of fonts, how it appears. Look closely at those. And also be on the lookout for buyers that are just plain nonchalant as to what they're doing. A fraudster doesn't spend their own money. They're not as worried about the extras to be added, the value-added products, the implications of not having life insurance. All of those things, when that discussion becomes a bit, well, let's just get it done with, be even more vigilant then. So with all of these red flags, what can you do? Because sometimes you just have to go and deliver a car off-site and the customer won't be coming to your dealership. Sometimes you have to put it on a truck and transport it across a province and then trust somebody else in that province to do the verification on your behalf. Now, that's where it becomes tricky because that's like the playground for a fraudster. So physical identity, identify and verify the customer face-to-face. We call it FICA. When you FICA a customer, that's the identification and verification process. Don't do that unless a physical presence has been had. Do not rely on a third party or a salesperson to identify a client on your behalf. They will not take it as serious as what you will take it. I mean, we were all in our 20s. We thought that all these rules, processes, procedures were there for us to overcome them, to show our bosses that it's easier not to do them. But they are there for a very, very specific reason, and they've been put in there in place by people that have a lot of experience, and by following them, fraud can be prevented. Compare all documentation at your disposal with that the client has when you see them face to face. Make sure the client is in front of you is the same as what is recorded on Home Affairs and on the NATA system. And then with all of this, use the tools that are available to verify the customer. I've got 3 examples here of tools that you've got access to as a dealer. The one is the FloorFin system provided by ABSA. It was the first of its kind to be an authentication tool, and it allows a dealer to match the client to the eNatus database. A client needs to give consent in order for that to be done. But this step, as in many incidences, prevent fraud even before a deal started happening, even before documentation was started to be handed in and the application was put on the system. Another one is the HANIS, the HANIS report. It's the Home Affairs National Identification System. And on each first podium, so every time that there's an approval on an application, it tells the dealer or the delivery salesperson who needs to do the physical identification of the client that they are dealing with to ensure that all documents provided correspond with what the Department of Home Affairs has on their database. These controls are however much more effective when there's a level of biometrics that coincide with it. So do consider making that investment as well. Then adopt these tools that are developed by we call them EBOs, electronic business originators. They're the integration that sits between banks and the dealership. And they also have additional tools to help prevent fraud. Don't discount the importance of training and regular training, getting in contact regularly with your bank as well to understand what the latest trends are and what to look out for, but make that a two-way conversation. When things start looking too good to be true, share it with the bank so that they can share it with other dealers. Because if it's happening with you, it's going to happen elsewhere. And you would like that same courtesy to be passed on to your dealership. Be cautious when accepting temporary identity documents and always refer to the bank to perform additional checks in those instances. Then take your time, especially when you are being rushed to get something through over month's end. And it's then a time to step back and say, is this the right documents that I'm receiving? Is this the correct customer that's standing in front of me? And that links in with knowing your business. Always adhere to FICA legislation and processes and procedures that have been put in place in order to prevent this fraud. So in summary and in conclusion, we all need to remain ahead of the game in a fight against fraud. That's where the financial services provider, I think, plays a big role in enabling this whole digital online purchasing way of living in the future, which is very present now. But it makes it very important that where that physical interaction does happen, doesn't matter who is doing it, that they follow that same processes and procedures to prevent financial loss. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you, Henry. Sure. There was a lot of great advice in there. I think for everybody listening today, I think just take heed of what was shared. And then on that note, we will be sharing the recording of this presentation to all delegates who have joined. And so don't worry too much. We'll get you the information directly after this. And then just a reminder, please, if you do have any questions, please post them in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, and we will get there. But Henry, just a few things from my side, and there were so many things that you spoke about. But when you go through your checklists and like what to look out for, you know, I think it gets back to the first point that you made. That all ties into identification and verification. You know, if you follow those steps, those are the two key points for me. And yeah, I thought that was really interesting. And you know, my daughter this morning, just to change subject totally, she's like sent me this WhatsApp, and Dad, we need to buy this puppy. And I was looking and I looked at everything, and it was exactly the same thing. It was just too good to be true. So as consumers, we need to be aware, and we need to be mindful of the fact that there are people out there that are trying to take us for a ride. And it doesn't matter where you are. We just need to be aware of it and be ready to act when we can. But Henry, thank you so much. That was very enlightening. Before we go now into who we're building up quite a bit to George, and there's no pressure on you, George, don't worry. But I think we just want to run a quick poll about what we're talking about now. So I'm going to launch the poll. Please, will you answer it? I'm going to give you a short while to answer the questions, and then I will share the results with you. I'm going to launch it now. You'll see it on your screen. Okay, everybody can see. Okay, can you all participate? Can you see this? There we go. Okay, the numbers are rising very quickly. Just going to leave it up for a little bit longer. Don't be shy. Let's get in there. I'll share the results, I promise. Okay, we're up to about 62%. I'm going to let it run a little bit longer and then I'll stop. Okay, I'm going to stop in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I'm going to end the poll. And I'm going to share the results with you now. And there you go. You can see, do you believe physical brick and mortar dealerships are necessary? Yes, 87%. What is the likelihood you would conclude a purchase of a vehicle virtually, but with a physical test drive? Possibly 49%. So people are open to the idea of doing this. And I believe that both a physical dealership and a virtual sales solution would work hand in hand. That was the hybrid model that we were talking about earlier, Mark. And that is 94% of people said that they would be open to that. So that's just very interesting, some engagement and just building up to George. So George can use that. Don't use it, George. It's all good. But yeah, on that note, George, I'm going to just put the spotlight on you. There we go. And over to you, George. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Neil, and thank you to everybody for joining, and thanks, Mark and Henry. That was very insightful. Mark and I actually do agree. You may not get that out of my presentation, but we actually do agree in the future of physical dealerships. I don't think that physical dealerships are going anywhere, both on the new and the used car side, but that's a whole talk for another day. And I think Mark did a brilliant job in kind of convincing you of that. So thank you for being here. So what I'm going to try and do today is provoke some thought starters related to the future of car retail using the data that Autotrader has. But there's one thing that we can be certain of, is that life has been a little bit unusual, and that the alien invasion of Earth was not from outer space, but in fact from our very own planet. And we stand here talking today about the future of entire markets, about industries, faster digital transformation, digital retail, and how to stimulate current retail sales. So on that note, for everybody who doesn't know me, my name is George Mini. I was born in the mother city of Cape Town, and I'm a techie at heart. I like to operate on what I call the bleeding edge of technology, and this costs more than average, as one tends to spend money on tech that sometimes doesn't work out. But the nice thing about that is you learn. I coded games on this Commodore 64 when I was 9, and did computer courses while I was studying other stuff at university. I took my mother's only computer apart several times a week when I was a teen, and I always have the latest iPhone because of this bleeding edge problem that I have. And even now, I'm an early adopter of the electric car, my beloved Jaguar I-Pace. I've also installed a full off-grid solar system in my home and have no more fuel or electricity costs. So it's amazing. I've got 36 solar panels. On that particular image, it was before I upgraded the solar panels, but at the moment I've got 36 solar panels, two 8.8 kilowatt inverters generating about 18 kilowatt hours at maximum load. My car draws about 7.7 kilowatt hours when it's charging. So I'm also lucky to be able to have seen things that I'm passionate about and met world leaders in the car retail and marketplace auto industries. And most importantly, I'm surrounded by the real heroes of Autotrader, which are its people. So in the last 18 years that I've been at Autotrader, a lot has happened. Today, we have a deep understanding of three things: the South African auto industry, digital platforms, and car shopping on both the buy and the sell sides. Autotrader is now a fully fledged online two-sided marketplace, but it didn't start there. Autotrader was a print company that produced a physical product. Our print and distribution volumes were unmatched and very, very hard to copy. So I've lived through digital transformation in every sense of the word, including facing fierce competition during that time, including a near displacement by our competitors. But that's a talk for another day if you ever want to hear about a near miss disruption of Autotrader. But that is all behind us now. Today, Autotrader is in order of magnitude bigger than we ever were in print, and over 2 times bigger than the nearest competitor in every single metric. So given this experience and success, I'd like to propose 3 ideas based on this experience and what I've learned during this time as it goes for car retail. But first, let me create some structure. There are 2 types of businesses in the world. The one is a producer of products, and the other one is a platform business. And rarely, and very, very, very rare, there is the combination of both. Let's focus on the producer business for a second. A producer business is a seller of a physical product, or the producer of a physical product. Cars, cell phones, physical world products. Value creation typically in these businesses happen inside the company. And again, there's a longer talk on producer type business. On the other side, however, there are platform businesses. This is where value creation happens outside the company. Platforms focus on the interactions of users and their customers, both on cross-side as well as same sides of the network. And if you increase the quantity and the quality of these interactions, one builds a better business. And some of what I'm going to tell you a little bit later on in terms of car retail has been got through understanding those interactions on the platform business. So Auto Trader was a producer business. And as I said just now, our print and distribution volumes were unmatched, very, very hard to copy. And so we had to change. Otherwise, we would have been disrupted. And the change took a long time in South Africa. And South Africa is very unique. As anybody will tell you, South Africa is very unique with the very large diversity that we have. And this shift was our primary focus for about 10 years. And you can see that 10-year process on that slide. But it also left us vulnerable. Very vulnerable. By 2017, however, we had become a fully fledged online business with 100% of our car revenue coming from online sources. So now, as I said just now, we are truly a fully fledged online two-sided vertical marketplace platform servicing buyers and sellers of vehicles. And our mission is to create a trusted, and Henry spoke about trusted, safe and transparent vehicle marketplace that empowers, enables, and improves the lives of those we connect. And I'm sure you will agree with me, however, that the traditional innovation curve, which you see on the screen right now, and everybody's seen this innovation curve, lots of consulting companies that have used it. But I believe that this innovation curve has compressed. And you know, the aliens and all caused a little bit of the compression, but arguably this compression and change was happening anyway. And we've noticed in the data that consumers react very quickly to their environment, but businesses don't. And it's a strange phenomenon because all of us are consumers in these businesses in our own right. So why don't businesses react as fast as consumers? So to get these three ideas I spoke to you about on the table that I have for you, we have to agree a couple of other things. And that is that there are 38 million internet users in South Africa, probably more now post-COVID. I'm not going to say post-COVID because maybe it's not post-COVID, but maybe if somebody's listening to this in about 5 years' time, it'll be post-COVID. But perhaps more importantly, however, users are becoming more experienced online. And that's the green bars that you see on the screen, the 5-year participation curve, as I put it. And there is also a close correlation between internet speed, user adoption, and digital product development. And the next big thing is connected cars. All of you should know that. Can you imagine the advertising opportunities inside this device that you guys sell? Have you ever thought about retailing cars inside the cars you retail? So of the 38 million internet users, where are they? Besides in the connected cars of the future, 25 million of them are using social media in South Africa and very often on a daily basis. And it's growing pretty fast. In fact, the main social media platforms are growing incredibly fast. Why? They have the consumer's attention every single day, and particularly during this lockdown period that we've had over the last 2 years. But the mistake we all make is to misunderstand how to use a platform to get to the consumer. We are all confused about where to market and where to retail, how to market and how to retail. And there's a massive difference. Very simplistically, however, there are only two things. The first one is that you need to retail. And we're going to get into a little bit of detail of retail in a second. And then the other side of the coin is building a brand. You have to do both. We see too much retail going on in the market and not enough brand building. So let's start with using the right messages in the context of the consumer on each of the platforms to leverage online audiences. And what I see very, very often in car retail is that car retailers are slapping the same content on every one of these platforms. And that is absolutely the wrong thing to do. None of these platforms are the same. This might be the same user that's visiting each of these, but they're going there for a different reason. Because at the end of the day, if you only try and retail and you don't build a brand, you will become irrelevant. Because the internet commoditizes everything. And only companies that have built a brand will be left standing in the end of the day. The second thing we're going to have to agree on today is that the car shopping journey is moving online. Okay, now that is the controversial statement, I guess, but I don't think it will entirely move online for a very, very long time for all the reasons Henry as well as Mark discussed. But it is moving online. And keeping pace with that change is what is important for car retailers. But South Africa has a problem, and that is transparency. Now, it's not a problem that the rest of the world didn't face. South Africa faces a transparency problem when it comes to finance. Are you seeing the potential disruption coming? And the problem that South Africa faces, which will be overcome, and a few times in the past, we have predicted the future and been historically correct. And today, I'm hoping that I'm going to be historically correct. And so I'm giving you a heads up that when the regulation around finance changes and sellers are forced to put finance deals side by side, the finance world for car retailers will change. So I'll ask you again, are you seeing the change coming? Are you seeing this coming? Because our research shows that 80% of consumers don't want to sit inside your retail store in front of an F&I getting pre-approved. They want to do it online. We've recently launched a feature called Search by Monthly Payment on Autotrader's platform. You can go and have a look. And finance pre-qualification. Literally 2 weeks ago, we launched these things. And consumers are coming in absolute droves. In the last 2 weeks of having it live, we've seen 1,000 searches by monthly payment and 350 pre-qualifications per day and growing. So if that's finance, the other side of the potential, retail challenges is the consumer sell side. And digital car selling in that slide, I don't mean digital car selling by dealers. I mean the sell side on the consumer side. Current players are too people heavy and too slow. So Autotrader, we launched a competitive product that you might have heard of already called Instant Offer, which seeks to protect dealers' trade-ins by providing a digital product that helps you get your hands on the cars, on the consumer's car, the traditional trade-in. And we've gotten to, over the last couple of weeks since this product has been live, we've gotten to about 2 deals a day and growing that is going through the platform. But I don't want to talk to you about Instant Offer and digital car selling by the consumer. I want to talk to you about the biggest problem we've seen inside the data of Instant Offer. And that impacts car retailers massively. And that is how dealers value cars. What we see is that the current valuation platform, or books, or whatever you want to call it, is about 18% on average off the actual value of the car. So how does a dealer value a car in this environment? So your license to play in this environment of car buying and selling is the retail back valuation in the future. There's going to be no other way, supplemented with transactional data. Pricing to market every single day and every single week. I can't tell you how many times we see in our data car retailers not changing the price of the car based on demand and supply. If the car is at a price today, next week that car might have depreciated, the following week it might have appreciated. I have seen examples with a couple of years ago, there was the Hyundai Tucson was very popular. As a matter of fact, I think it was the 2017 model. In 2018, crossing the cusp to 2019, the 2017 Hyundai Tucson actually appreciated in value. Recently, because of lockdown and the chip shortage and all those things, we've seen double-digit increases in retail prices of cars. So I want to ask you, are you keeping up? Have you kept up with the pace of this presentation? Because the digital world is moving even faster. But more importantly, what role are you going to play in shortening your innovation curve? So in summary, you can achieve all three of these. Understand where the consumer's attention is and play into why they are on a particular platform as a car retailer. Leverage existing retail platforms, but also at the same time build an online brand for your dealership I'm not talking about the brand for BMW, Toyota, all those the OEMs do. I'm talking about building a brand as a dealership, local SEO. That's what the term is called. Embrace online car finance. It's going to happen. Car buying through proper retail back valuations is the only way to get your hands on the consumer's car. So if I can ask you to follow me on all of these platforms and follow my journey, and thank you for your time.
George, thank you very much. That was very, very enlightening. I just want to, there were a few things in your presentation, George, and there were quite a few things that I took for it. The one was not enough brand building, so too focused on product. And then I think I agree with you that people are misusing platforms. So they are there for certain reasons, but everybody is using the platform incorrectly. Well, not everybody, but a lot of people. So tweak your message for each individual platform. And then one of the last points you made just around your instant offer, just pricing for the market, to the market needs based on demand and supply. So it becomes a very variable metric. And that to me was very interesting. So George, from my side, thank you very much for putting on all that effort. Really appreciate it. And now we're going to hand over to Tommy, who is going to ask a few questions to our panelists. Thank you.
Okay. Now thanks for that, George and Neil. So I'll just get straight to it, as we see time is going and we've got very interesting questions. So the question I'll pose it to Mark, and I see one of the guys asked the question to say, who sets the price? And you answered us more on the manufacturers. However, what is causing this disruption between supply and demand, and that drives the price up, especially on your second-hand vehicles on that, Mark?
Okay, yeah, multifaceted question there. So on the new, it's just to distinguish new cars to used cars. On the new car front, we've had COVID has caused all sorts of problems, as George said. And thank you for your presentation, George. I loved it. As George said, the aliens have created a nightmare, and part of them, and some of the things that have happened, the nightmare, are massive commodity price increases. Steel, for one, is I think 4 times more expensive than it was 2 years ago. Shipping is a massive shipping crisis, in the sense that there's a shortage of shipping availability, and container pricing has gone also through the roof. South Africa is also a bit of a net negative shipping destination, so it's very expensive to bring cars here. You add that to a rand dollar that's depreciated, and you can understand how cars have increased in pricing all over the world, but more so here. So that's the first thing. So that's on the new car side. On the used car side, because of COVID, we've had a lack of vehicle supply into the market, into the used car market. So we only sold 386,000 cars in a normal year of more than 500,000 cars. That caused a huge shortage of used cars and created a fantastic used car bubble. So people actually got, if you owned a used car and you sold it, you would know that you would have maintained values very, very well. On the side of the dealerships, obviously dealerships determine the price of the used car, as George said, and I think the franchise industry probably has been guilty of not being aggressive enough, and we've been shown up. And I think that's well known, and it's been shown up now because of the fantastic pricing in the used cars. So I think if you have a used car right now that's in the sweet spot, you'll get a great price, but be careful of selling it, because you've got to be careful of what you can buy with that money.
Okay, now thanks a lot, Mark. I'll make sure I make a 10 by your dealership. Henry, I think in terms of fraud, I mean, as much as we try to make sure that everything is in order, so the question is more on what happens to the cars that the fraudsters eventually are able to buy. Are we able to recover those vehicles as a financial institution and the dealerships? So what's happening once the car is out there?
Yeah, no, the first objective would be to get that car back as soon as it's found out to be fraud. So the sooner we're able to find that out, the better chance you've got still track and trace where that vehicle is. It obviously also helps if that vehicle was fitted with a tracking device, but that's also the consumer's choice that buys the vehicle if they allow for that to be implemented. You can't just put it in with the worry that it might be a fraudulent sale. But yes, no, we try our very best to go and find that vehicle before it maybe goes across the border and you can't find it anymore.
Okay, now thanks. Maybe let me just also put this one in, and I think it will be directed more to you, Henry. They're saying that the question comes from Anonymous, and I'll just read it verbatim. Are the financial institution going to align financing model or parameters to accommodate this increase in prices? Loan to value is always out of line, hence the increase in application declines. Is it something that we look at, or is it done case by case?
In vehicle financing, it is considered to, I mean, it happens in many cases, like those fancy cars that Mark was looking at over the weekend. You start optioning them up with additional extras. So as you said, it was 100,000 Rand more extras and you didn't even choose them. So immediately that car is now selling for 100K more than what its retail value is. So there is consideration for that happening. It's not only that a bank stops at 100% of the value will get financed. With good risk customers on good assets that they're buying, so something that's newer, has a good warranty behind it, it is considered to finance for a higher amount than the original price of the vehicle. But it's also time to be wary for everybody, the dealer, the consumer, the bank, that supply will return unless we get hit by another pandemic, which is unlikely. It's a 1 in 100-year event. And when that supply returns, then prices start normalizing. We're sitting now in a very surreal period where we've sold so few new cars that we actually have a shortage in used vehicles. With all the new vehicles returning now, with new models being introduced, you're going to get more used vehicles being traded in again. So that car park that sits listed on Autotrader and in the dealership with Mark is going to grow again, and then the prices will normalize.
Okay. Now thanks on that. George, I think there's a question here from Marcia. It's more around the commercial vehicle sales process, because we understand the investment there is very high. Therefore, do you see this, and from your platform, do you still see uptake of people buying commercial vehicles online, or what's your view on that side?
So thanks, Marsha, for the question. So our commercial vehicle part of our platform, which is called Autotrader Commercial, and so if I put it in perspective, biggest car platform, we're also the biggest commercial platform, and with very little effort, we're also the biggest motorbike platform, which we've put no effort into actually. So we're very lucky. But on the commercial vehicle platform, the data that we're seeing is that it is following the trend of car, probably 2-3 years behind, and from a commercial vehicle point of view, the pricing in the market is slightly different in that commercial vehicle users, or the user of a truck, can extend using that truck for a little bit longer. It's not like a consumer, and so we haven't seen the price increases in the commercial arena as much as we've seen in the car world.
Okay, just last question here. I mean, we are talking about online buying, but then we've also seen recently where you can order a car that is sitting in Cape Town, for example. So how does that work in terms of fraud, and have you experienced such cases on that?
Is that the question directed to me?
Now, Mark, or you can take the question.
I'll try, George. Okay. I mean, I think you just have to be exceptionally careful of fraud in the place. I think what I really liked about Henry and his presentation, what he said with the tell signs, and I think at any dealer network or any business, somebody wanted to transact not on the premises, putting in a rush, 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, month end, all these things. I thought that was really pertinent, so I got a lot of value out of that.
Okay. Now, thanks.
Now, later, Neil.
Yeah. Okay. Now thanks on that, Mark, and I'd like to thank everyone who participated in this. We are seeing the questions, and we'll definitely make sure that we give you a written reply on all the questions on that. I just want to thanks Nada, RMI, and the ABSA Vehicle Finance team, also including Auto Trader on that, and everyone who's participated on this. We still believe that there is a lot that we can do and collaboratively with everyone on that, because we are a team that wants to see the automotive industry moving forward on this and protecting our end user customers on this. So I just want to say thanks to everyone and hand it back to Neil on that. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you, Tommy. Just to end off from an Automechanica point of view, just a big thank you for joining this Let's Talk Business session in association with ABSA Bank. And as Tommy mentioned, we will be sharing the presentation. There were many questions that came through, and we will try to answer those questions post the webinar. Sorry, we couldn't get to all of them now. And then the next Let's Talk Business webinar will take place on the 22nd of March. And the focus is on aftermarket remanufacturing, disruption, and evolution. So look out for that. There will be communication about that soon. And then just to end off, to all of our speakers, thank you so much for all of your efforts in making today possible, for expanding our product knowledge and our knowledge base, and for your efforts. I really do appreciate it. And to all of our delegates, thank you so much for joining. And on that note, we're going to end now. So thank you, everybody, and take care.